And yeah, whenever the Prime Minister is ready, we can start the debate.
Yeah. What's up? Um, Hi. Am I audible?
Yes.
Super. Let me find the thing. Panel, there's going to be two contributions from OG. The first one is that we get less sex workers overall, and we're going to show to you why it's a good thing. Then we're going to mitigate a lot about how like the power structures in like porn industry, how they're actually like not as bad as people think, and how there's like a lot of harms that happen to the people that do opt into like online sex work, right? So that's the first one. Why do we actually believe we get less sex workers overall? So the first one is the perceived barrier of entry to do OnlyFans is actually way less than it is to do porn or escorting, right? In order to do OnlyFans, I just have to download an app and I have to like post things on it, right? So it's quite easy and accessible to me. Versus like going to the porn, it actually requires me like filling out, like finding a studio where I film things that with an actual producer. In order for me to like be getting paid for this, if I want to be escorting, I have to find an escorting agency or something like that. But secondly, I think that oftentimes OnlyFans has been hyped up by choice feminism for it to be perceived as a thing that is empowering women, where actually it's not true. It's like the reverse, right? Like even though they say that this is something that is empowering women and people should opt into this, what often happens is that like women are being controlled by the people that are they're like personal customers with whom they have to do their relationship thing, etc. But thirdly, why we have less sex workers is because like think about it, right? Porn studio is limited in its capacity to like when they do casting of like who they cast for a specific role, they cannot hire everybody, right? What this means is that like for one video maybe they need like one person like one woman and one man, etc., right? What this means is that they're not able to hire everybody overall, so they have to reject people to some degree, right? What this means is that overall you just have less people opting into this, right? Why is this something that is important? I think that oftentimes porn people that opt into sex work like oftentimes it happens at a very young age, something that people are not able to like fully comprehend the consequences of. But also oftentimes this is something that is socially stigmatized, meaning that this is not something that is very easy for people to like reverse the damages that like happening to them. But also like they experience those damages, they're still stigmatized by society when they reach out for help, which is like horrible for them, right? And what we tell you here is that if there is on scale less amount of people that opt into this, that this is just by itself is a good thing, right? Then but we're probably going to hear from opt that like the power structures of porn industry is like a bad thing, right? I think firstly, there's been a lot of history of unionization of like sex workers that were specific, and a lot of history of calling out like porn industry, escorting industries, etc., and kind of unionizing and demanding provision of like testing, provisions of like consent forms, etc., in order to make sure that this is done in like a more safer way, especially with the way how like the world is overall like liberalizing, etc., right? But also, if you are a person who wants to do this and you want to be your own boss rather than like work for a big industry, what you're most likely to do is do something like you rent a room at the hotel or like a motel, whatever, and then you invite your private clients there. So this is something that happens on our side of the house, right? Or like people still able to do. And secondly, like even if you want to do all of these power structures, etc., maybe there are some harms there. We conceded. I think that there is just like way more harms that happen, extreme harms that happen on our side of the house, where it's like about, or rather, like where online sex industry is more true, right? So firstly, what are these extreme harms? So firstly, the customer relationship it can be like extremely toxic, right? Because think about it, the amount of time and content that you have to produce is immense, right? Because like when you are in a porn industry, or if you are filming something for like Pornhub or an escorting or something like that, this means that you spent like an hour filming a scene, or you spent like 2 hours with the client, and then you're basically like done for the day, right? If you are a person who is like doing OnlyFans, what you have to do is create a lot of content in order for it to be pushed, and in order for it to be like exposed to the people. Oftentimes what people do is that they make a lot of posts on Instagram where they post thirst trap, and then they advertise their OnlyFans like this, meaning that they're always incentivized to be posting as much as possible, right? But this means that the way that it takes over all of your time and the livelihood that this is something that is happening, right? But secondly, in terms of like the things that you are being like asked to do, right? Oftentimes, like with specifically like OnlyFans, like this private customer client relationship thing, of specifically people that opt into this, right? Who ask for like personal requests, etc. There are specifically people who are not currently satisfied with the thing that they see that is openly available on like Pornhub for them, right? So they would rather talk to this personal connection. What this means is that they are more likely to ask for things that are more like fetish wise, right? In terms of like bondage, playing with like fecal matter, etc., right? Meaning and because the person who is like is a person who is like having this OnlyFans accounts, right? Now they're more likely to be persuaded and to believing that this is something that they have to do because this is their way to be making living, right? Is there a POI from CO? Uh-oh.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think doing 3 videos in a day is easier than doing sex for 2 hours because you need to get the perfect shot. I don't know.
No. This is not like doing it for 3 hours. You have to like what often happens is, for example, you do like challenges on like OnlyFans on an Instagram, like having like have sex with 1,000 men in like 24 hours. Why is this the case, right? Because the way that algorithm works is that people are naturally gravitated towards the things that are like actually more extreme. That this is what generates clicks, right? Meaning that and because you have to compete with other content creators, you always are incentivized to do this to always to make it as more extreme as possible and push it in this specific direction, right? But also because on their side, this is something that happens like way more, right? What is then the impacting of this? I think that the intensity of harm, how specifically you feel about the things that you're doing and how you're basically coerced into this, right? Even though and if people are like not opting into this and then this is is a good thing, right? And if it's like less of these people that are doing this, that this is also like by itself is like how you say a good thing. But secondly, in terms of like in terms of like if you're like doing escort, in terms of harms that go into long term, right? If you do something on OnlyFans, this is something that stays like online like basically forever, right? If you're somebody that opted into escorting, that there is like afterwards like very little evidence that this is something that happened, right? Meaning that like nobody is in the future. Meaning that in the future, if you don't want, this is something that you no longer want to do, then like there is less ability for this kind of haunt you like going to the future. Meaning that you become more adaptable in this specific way. For this reason, propose.
Thank you for that speech, and now invite the leader of the opposition to open the case for opposition bench.
Okay, am I audible?
You are.
Great. POI to start, please. Or raise your hands. If I haven't taken it by 5:30 or something, please then open your mics and ask. Okay. So I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. As a position, we think it's really simple. We want the freedom of choice when it comes to how you work. And this applies with 2 different ways, both the people that would opt anyway into something sexual related or would just go now because, yes, we agree, it's more acceptable. We have these 2 separate paths of victory in this debate. First, we're going to prove why it's a better alternative compared to any other form of sex work that exists, that being either porn or more harmly being an actual sex worker that is paid by customers to do work. And secondly, our second case will be why this is a legitimate form of a job that gives you more freedom in what you're accepting, and as a secondary level of impacting, why this will also increase body positivity messaging. So let's go first to our first point, which actually classes a lot with OG, so I will rebut them in my case. So it allows for better working conditions. We think that the people that work there, exactly because there is this stigma around, usually are people that have some need for money, either that being extreme need for money or being something more mild that they don't want to spend too many hours working because they need it immediately. We think that it is a kind of hard work, thus they are more likely to be those that need this money. Why the working conditions in any other form are worse than what we have now? First of all, in all of these cases, physical contact is required. This alone has many risks. First, from violence, that people can be aggressive, and that is more prominent when you have paid clients working with you. But even in poor settings, it is not unusual to hear of co-casting actually abusing each other. And we see that even in non-porn films, that there is abuse. We think that in settings where sex is involved and where sex is the main, it's not checked as much and sexual content, it is much more likely that you have this violence, mere from the fact that you're very proximate to your co-casting and to your director that has some power over you, because they're the people that are paying you, and thus if they are not paying you, you will lose on what you have. Secondly, is the fear of sexually transmitted diseases. We think that this is important in either case whenever sex is involved, and even though we may have some controls in order, and if there are some checks, we think that first of all, these checks are not always done, especially when we have the pure form of sex work. But even in a porn setting, we think that it is much more likely that you will get something compared to not having it at all. But finally, we think that it is worse mere for the fact that you don't have control over the content that you're posting. When you have an OnlyFans account, yes, you may have some customers that may require some things, but you can reject an offer and you can have more control on what you're doing. If you hold dependencies on having some creation for the porn, you have less control of what you're choosing. Thus, it is harder to refuse a choice, because then you will lose the contract that you have or the provider that you have, and it will be much harder for you to find another equally respectable job. On the other hand, on OnlyFans, you have the freedom to choose what you're doing, but you also have the freedom to get away from a customer or report the customer. And this platform usually holds some checks and mechanisms so that if a customer is reported, then they can be held accountable, or at least, not allowed to interact with other users as well. Thus, we think that in terms of protection, it is much better for the people that would choose it anyway. But now let's move on to our second stakeholder, which are the people that get it. And I wonder what OG will try to say that, it will make it work for these people and we would like them more. We think that in principle, sex work and any form of sex work, so much as this form of sex work, which is just purely posting some content of your body, is an equal job, and it should be equally legitimate and should be equally destigmatized. And we think that these platforms are what I'm doing. So, first of all, what's a legitimate form of work? You offer a service that you're paid for. This service is something that you do on your own, and thus it has some value for some people. Some people are asking for it, and thus they pay you because they want. This is the first prerequisite of having an actual job. But the second is that it doesn't harm others. This is why, for example, selling drugs is not considered a job, even if it's a service. But we think that to the point that you're not harming any other person, that you're only involving yourself, and that you're only involving your body, and as your body can properly serve to others without causing any harm to another third being, you fulfill also the second requirement for this being a legitimate job. The third part that we have to cover is the fact that you have the basic rights and you have the basic freedom, and thus your own working rights are not violated. We think that to the point that you have the choice of choosing what your customer and you have the freedom of choosing what content you post on these platforms, and you have the choice to see what freedom you're supporting there, your rights are not violated in the same way that if you're self-employed, you have no working rights are violated the moment that you choose what you're doing. Before I move on to why other jobs are equally bad, I will take a point from closing.
Look, if your first argument was true, we would actually see people moving from prostitution to doing this. But prostitution is just as common. The red light districts are still there. There is no change.
Okay. First of all, our argument is not that we get more people from there to us. We think that the main argument is that the people have another choice that is better for them. That people that are in need don't have to go there in the first place, and they can at some point do less. But our argument does not depend on the fact that you have these huge chains and that people do not go to porn at all, because yes, we accept that it offers sometimes more money, and thus you're more likely to go there if you're in such great desire, but this is no change in other words. So let's move move on to what is actually a very positive case that we have. So why other jobs are not better than this? First of all, most times they require a lot of manual work. If government side wants to run that, oh, you're exploiting your body, oh, you lose your self-respect or something like that, I hope they don't, but they cannot run that because in most jobs that require no degree, thus they have the same buyer for engines that OnlyFans have, you require more manual work, more hours, and you end up overworking your body because it has less salary, thus you need to work more for gaining the same money. But also the sexualization still exists because in most service industries that it exists, you have to deal with rude customers, with customers that sexualize you every day, even if you don't intend to. Unless in OnlyFans, you are paid for being sexualized at some point, and you have control over what parts of your body are sexualized and present the sexual, thus preserving more of your self-worth and self-value that you feel for yourself. And the last burden that we need to prove for this to exist is why it's an informed source. We think that it's informed the moment that this is not something new, exactly because since the beginning of, I don't know, magazines or something, porn has been out there. People know what making porn or making any content related to sex work can do to your future. And you know and very consent to that being either publicized to some people or not. We think that the moment that you know that, and the moment that there are some other alternatives that the government is citing for, that they're going to say it's not, we think that it's informed that you make the prioritization either to get more money or to get that out. For all those reasons, we think that it's a legitimate and better form of work, vote OO.
Thank you for that speech, and now I invite the Deputy Prime Minister to conclude the case for opening government.
Am I audible?
You are.
Perfect. EY, please, in chat. First point of rebuttal, online content often does involve real sex. It is not just solo work, i.e. what you often see is the POV of penetration because it appeases the client where they want to see themselves in the perspective of penetrating the online creator. Oftentimes you also have a lottery of sex with with the highest paying consumers. It's similar to a Patreon. If you pay the highest fee, they often then have these lotteries. You also do a lot of challenges, which was what hit the news globally in the past 2 months, where content creators on OnlyFans did challenges of having sex with the over 1,000 men in 24 hours and basically broke down afterwards. So I think that all of the things on you don't have sex with anyone real is just doesn't stand. But two, on the relations with the people, because they say the moment a second person is involved, it's very bad. First, on the one-to-one thing where we have escort and prostitution, we think you're way better. Your relation is way better because one, you are humanized. You are a real person with boundaries, etc. in this interaction. I.e., the person sees you, can touch you, and knows that you are a person. If they did dehumanize you as a prostitute or something like that, oftentimes what it is that you work within brothels or you work within hotels that are meant for sex work. This means that you have a panic button. So if they do something, you can press that and a security officer comes in. This is true for both in countries where it's legal, where this is mandated, or two, even if it's illegal, because hotels just do this low key where they put in panic buttons everywhere. Not only that, but you're also way more likely to feel the consequences on what you want and what you don't want on yourself. This means that one, you're way likely to quit earlier, which is good because sex work is extremely taxing. But secondly, you're also way more likely to talk to the other prostitutes that are in the brothel in your breaks and actually tell them if you feel unwell, etc. And this means that they're more likely to help you because you have a community around you. Secondly, online relations are extremely toxic, and the moment you don't have interaction with your clients and they don't have interaction with you, you become a means to an end. Anton already tells you that the people that seek out these things and are willing to pay a lot of money for people to make money, because it is actually not true that it's so easy to make money. To make money, you have to have a lot of clicks, a lot of willing paying customers, meaning that most 90% of people on OnlyFans make only $100 a month. It is only the top 5% that make really a lot of money. This means that in order to jump out, to get to the point, you need to do a lot of fetishized stuff. This means very specific narratives that the client wants. This means that they pay you to do things like dress up as a little girl or degrade yourself or say their name and things like that. Note that what happens is that the line of what you find acceptable and unacceptable shifts oftentimes quite slowly, where you start with maybe a few things, but when you start like being propagated in the community of people who have that specific fetish, you get more and more requests of that kind of sort, and your line of what you do shifts with time, meaning that you are not even yourself aware that you're now doing things that you actually didn't want to do in the first place. On our side, you don't feel like you owe it to the porn industry to film more fetish scenes, because there's still an industry for vanilla porn or lesbian porn. Like lesbian porn is like what most girls start doing when they start out in the porn industry, because it is the easiest type of porn for them to do. They feel the most safest. And note that also the line between going from vanilla porn to fetish porn is way more extreme than slowly doing customer requests. Not only that, but also because you start to have parasocial relationships with them where you believe you're completely dependent on them. This power asymmetry is way less if you have a company, if you work for the porn industry, because what happens is you film a scene, you get paid for that scene, and that is usually quite a lot of money. And then if you have a good contract, you also get a percentage if that porn gets bought a lot, or if it is like browsers, if it gets clicked a lot, right? This means that once the work is done, it's done. You don't need to struggle for each and every click. The amount of work that you need to do, like $5 for like masturbating and orgasming, saying one name, then doing that for another customer, etc. If you're starting out, you have to do that a lot, and you have to do it over and over and crazier in order to actually get the money that you need, which OO agrees that you need. Not only that, but they also agree that more people are willing to do sex work, and unless they take down all the things that Anton tells you why sex work is bad, they cannot win on that. Why is there worse accountability, also directly clashing with OO? First, what are the ways you can get accountability? The first is legal. Note that on their side of the house, it is nearly impossible to get legal repercussions. One, because a lot of these platforms say that they're not responsible for the content that is posted on them, i.e. you yourself as a content creator are responsible, or the person that is writing. Two, it is oftentimes impossible to prosecute someone online. Oftentimes these are people from completely different countries that you don't even know whether your government cooperates with that government, meaning that you don't really get the retribution or the reparation that you want. Three, you also don't believe often that you are a victim. The first thing that you need to believe in order to get help is that you have been violated. The choice feminism makes people online that do this kind of work believe that all they do is their choice, and that it is completely normal, and they have been in control. The truth is that the client and the money payer has been in control, and a lot of times these people only 5 to 10 years after speak out about how horrible the pressure was that they were feeling to have sex with 1,000 men within 24 hours. This is the reality on op. Before I continue, CO? OO?
Are you not okay with freelancing developers that choose projects?
This is not the same. Like, you have to draw the comparison. You also like you're oftentimes hired by a business and you form a contract with the online platforms. It's completely different, where you have content, and that is like very different. Two, and also the type of work is bad. The second type, on a comparative, you have a company or you have a brothel or an escort service that is able to pursue legal matters for you against the client, or you can pursue legal matters against them because they are an entity that you can sue. Two is public backlash. The choice feminism has ruined any type of support and empathy for online creators, because they say it is their own fault that they're doing these things, and it was their choice. So there's no clear perpetrator. It was you. You did that. There's no empathy, meaning the amount of call out is way worse than if you are a prostitute and you say, my client violated me. We think that the empathy is probably limited on both sides, but way less on there. Thirdly, community. You lose the prostitution community if you do online work. This is one of the best things. You tell each other what are the tips and tricks with clients. You protect each other from harassment clients. You tell each other how to deal with things. This is extremely isolating and doesn't provide good work conditions. For all of these reasons, vote OG.
Thank you for the speech, and now invite the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to close the top half debate.
Okay, can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I will be taking non-verbal PORs if it's as possible. Give me a sec to order my papers. Okay. the moment someone walks into a brothel house, he feels like he's guilty. He feels like he's being shunned upon by society. He believes what he's doing is somehow akin to illegality. He thinks that this is not the correct thing to do. This means that people that go there are significantly worse people. They're people that are okay with being akin to illegality, where they're okay with being close to stuff that's shunned upon by society. We may buy that government says we have more sex workers in the world. Yeah, sure. The issue that they have proven about why sex working is bad is significantly dependent upon live sex work, not online sex work. And we could do three things in the speech. One, explain the differences of online versus in-person sex work, then respond, and then bring a new argument as to how this normalizes body and sex positivity because it's significantly easier to be relatable. Firstly, on framing. How does online differ for in-person sex work? On content. Online necessarily has a full spectrum. I am able, yes, to do huge 24-hour challenges. This I can also do, I don't know, at a strip show, or I can do at an online porn channel, but I can also just show my feet. I can just send a photo where I have like a big décolleté. I don't know if this is also an English word, I don't know. I can do this stuff, and I can do it significantly easier. This means the main difference between the two, and the main difference where I'm actually able to win from opposition, is on soft porn, on things that are not direct penetration, because these are the things that weren't existing in the same extent before this came to mind. And this is the point where majority of new people opt in to OnlyFans. If they say that guys are going to switch from porn to OnlyFans, I'm good. I'm going to explain why OnlyFans is better than porn agencies. Then, on payment, the mere fact that online porn is significantly freer than OnlyFans means that I get more money in the case of online sex work in the forms of OnlyFans. On the comparative, I have less money, or if I need to get money, I need to do significantly more things. And there are two reasons for that. One, now I have a significant bigger audience. I can go and hit the Saudi Arabs to give me money to do stuff. They have more money. I can increase my prices. If I live in Athens, I cannot increase my prices domestically. But secondly, the moment I don't give money hand to hand, it's more easy for people to just put on a subscription on the card, and I don't remember that the subscription happens, or they're more easily converted. This means I have more money in online work. Thirdly, on the structure. In opening a position, you're the boss of yourself. You can choose when you quit. Yes, they may say that, I don't know, the client is going to push you to stay. I think it's worse if the pimp or the agency pushes you to stay. Marina says that contracts are the difference between, I don't know, developers freelancing. I think contracts happen only on porn agencies. They do not happen on OnlyFans. This means on OnlyFans, I can quit whenever I want. I don't need to fulfill my contract with the team and do another 5 or 10 jobs until I leave. The moment I fulfill, I can actively leave without any form of repercussion for my boss on online work. And then on freedom. One, historical evidence is symmetric. Either you're on YouPorn or you're on OnlyFans. I can still track you. I can still use, I don't know, web archives to see if you have done porn. It's symmetric. But on prostitutes, it's worse. The moment that they maybe not be able to see me doing porn, but I'm able to catch an STD from doing prostitution. I am able to have other things that are more immediate to me, which significantly harm my life. And then Angeliki has explained to you what's actually a decision that I can do. All this means that I get one, more money through online sex work, but two, I'm more free to opt out. Then, on responses. They say that sex working is bad. And why? The only method that PM has brought is because of young age, and thus they don't have sufficient info. I think this is vaguely false. One, Angeliki has explained why you do have information, but two, I think just pushing that young age happening only on OnlyFans and not happening on strip shows or on average, I don't know, amateur porn sites when then you go into official jobs. I think this is kind of bullshit. Then, on how porn industry is true, they have unions, and this is exactly the problem. The necessity of unions means that director strategies are so aggressive that you need to unionize to defend them. This means you need to fight back against your oppressors that are the directors. On the comparative, you don't fight back with something because you're yourself. I know, it's less capitalism. You don't have that hierarchy. It's better for you. They say you need to spend less time on porn. This is vastly untrue. One, I need to spend more time when I need to make specific shots and I need to make sure that the film is taken good. On the comparative, I can just take a selfie and upload it. It will not get as much money as the other thing, but it will get me money with 2 minutes of work and 1 minute of editing. Two, I can have flexible time. I can choose to do something now, do a lot of shots, and then start to distribute them within the week. This happens exclusively under position because I am responsible for the uploading program and schedule. But three, I can just do overdub or use AI and deepfake to do one scene and then change the names easily with AI later. It's not significantly worse to need to do every scene in reality. This never happens. Then, on how they kink shape for some reason rogue bunnies. I think no, this is bullshit. One, it's easier to reject if you're on OnlyFans because you're able to actively say no, I don't want to, and just block or I don't know, ghost the guy and just give him back his money. But even if you say it's okay, even if you accept you want to do crazy stuff, you're being better paid because I can actually get the Saudi Arabs to pay me back and not the average Greek guy that doesn't have that much money to spend on OnlyFans. And then, lastly, on pressure. One. Agents continue to exist under their side and under our side. I continue to be able to have agents. There are agencies that hire people to just do sexting or just do OnlyFans for them. This means if this is a way to avoid pressure, it can happen on the both sides. But I think mostly the fact that it's more legal and less frowned upon allows me more likely to go to the police. I don't have someone pressuring me to not go there. Before I continue, do you have anything from closing? Opening?
You concede that more people will do sex work. If that means that they can be found both on YouPorn or OnlyFans, if more people do it, that is bad because they ruin their careers in the future.
I can ruin my career by doing a stunt and then hurting my leg and not be able to lay bricks. I can do this. The moment I have reduced the stigma around soft porn, I'm more able to have these careers, and also it's a legit sales. I can choose to harm some part of me later on if it's okay. Then, on how it normalizes body sexist positivity. I think street work is significantly less relatable for 3 reasons. One, because it's associated to illegality. This means more people are frowning upon street work on the streets or on person. This means it's significantly less easy for people to connect. But secondly, soft porn. The moment I don't need to do a specific scene with, I don't know, double penetration or something, and I just can upload the picture in bikinis, it becomes significantly more relatable. But third, it appeals to people that are significantly more left liberal because they are about the body positivity. This means I can reduce the propaganda against online sex work. This means I can, one, interact better and feel better about my body if I see other people doing the same with their bodies. If I can see other people getting money out of wearing bikinis, I can be confident with their bikinis. If I see them doing significantly worse things, I'm not easily connected to share. For all those reasons, we beg you to oppose.
Thank you for that speech. We now invite the member of government to open. Thank you for that speech, and now invite the member of the opposition to open the case for closing opposition.
Cool. First of all, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for the dogs in the background if they are audible, but we cannot do a lot about them. So let me just set up my notes and I will start my speech. So I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Panel. The impact of OG is basically sex work is bad and less of the sex work is better, right? We don't believe that we can get rid of the sex work, right? That's the first thing. Second thing, if we didn't have ability to start, didn't have ability of OnlyFans to reappear, we'll have another instance of sex work being there. So we don't know why this impact is like I don't know, like probable. It is mostly speculative. We would have otherwise other platforms, other ways to go with this for sex work to happen, etc., right? Second of all, we got a lot of pushes from our own, so therefore we cannot fully buy the argumentation from the OG, especially as they talk about fringe cases like I don't know 1,000 men during one sitting, or like situations where like porn companies are those like union friendly good places, right? The same goes for OO. The OO has argumentation that tells you that the sex worker has more control, money, and easy to opt out. OG already pushed back on it, right? Telling you that you have to be bound to your customers and what they are needing. You have a specific fetish stuff that is happening there, etc., etc. Therefore, most of those argumentations that not only based on a fringe cases, right? That's the first thing. But second thing, they wash each other out. And third thing, they are deadlocking each other, right? Because we don't know on which side of the house we have a better control over our content, or somebody that gives us the control, or we have less or more sex work, because even if we have like more sex work on OO side, we don't know why this sex work is inherently more harmful after the argumentation of OG and the pushbacks from OO, right? So I will tell you why it is symmetric within the debate, and I will push back even more against what things are symmetric within this debate. I will push back against OG more, and then present you our case. So first of all, the instances of abuse of sex workers are quite symmetric, right? They may be lower, even if they are lower on scale and capacity on side of the opening government, right? Because they are happening, for example, in like porn studios or like closed castings, right? You have avenue to on our side of the house, you have avenue not to go to the abusive business if you have to do the sex work, right? You have more abilities to do that, etc. Second of all, the scale of cool, if the scale of cool and abusive companies is a deadlock on top half, we have and we assume the smaller group of sex workers and higher barrier of entry on their side of the house, right? The bigger group goes to the more shady, abusive companies, right? Because there's still more demand for porn media, right? Because it is already scarce when those platforms reappeared, right? So there is likely to not those companies are those media houses likely to not have the same safety precautions as big porn media houses have. Those media that this sex work is related is more scarce, right? So it is better for easier to capitalize on that for criminal groups, etc. That's why, for example, cartels now go from dealing in cocaine to like farming avocados because it is profitable. The same went for porn, right? The fourth thing, the fetish is less present. So in order to do that, you need criminal activity to get it, right? Or engage in really risky behavior as a sex worker and as a person who wants to get that fetishized porn or fetishized content, right? So on their side of the house, we have significantly more risk, even if for the smaller group of people, the risks are more severe and more impactful, right? Because if you're linked in on going into porn industry, you don't have ability to opt out and go to another platform, right? Because you work in content creation, not, for example, in prostitution, right? So on their side of the house, it is more inevitable to actually go into those shady places, and it is more harmful for you. So our case that we're gonna present you will engage with the mere existence of online platforms, and we are not gonna talk about sex work itself, right? Because we already told you that this is like symmetrical on both sides of the house. We'll do more proximate to the motion analysis that will show you why the mere existence of online platforms gives you more discourse and more ability to actually talk about sex work, to humanize it and make it better. I already see that they gave us some analysis on that, but I will go through other more important avenues of doing that. First of all, the mechanization. Sex work exists, right? Before those kind of platforms emerge, we have porn, we have prostitution, etc. We have a specific invention of close to people platforms like OnlyFans that do specific content that have a better relationship, etc., etc. Sex work becomes more popular because this kind of engagement is seen as something that is cooler and way better than out of touch porn that we have. So therefore, we have like maybe even better view of what the sexual activity is if you use OnlyFans, because you have to interact with a normal being comparatively to like sexual actress. Second of all, it is more a bit ubiquitous, right? So people know what OnlyFans is. Even if I ask my grandma or my mother, probably they will know what is OnlyFans and that something like that exists. Third of all, it is more diverse, right? Because if you had a porn house, porn media house, you had to do specific content that goes to the more biggest amount of customers. Right now, you have like smaller atomized content creators that do more content that is specifically targeted towards specific groups, right? So therefore, on a comparative, we have a more diverse content that has, like, for example, specific fetishes and stuff taken into it, right? Fourth of all, it is more common on social media, right? We have OnlyFans models doing like interviews, talking about their career, etc., right? So all that type of sex work is pushed out. So therefore, OnlyFans becoming common allows for the discussion of the problem of sex and treating sex workers, etc., So you have to deal with it, right? The sex work in this kind of form creates engagement. We hear stories about sex workers that seem normal, etc. because you don't have this like fetishized, I don't know, doing plastic surgeries, actors, etc., that talks to you about your story. You don't relate to that. You couldn't be the same person, right? On our side of the house, we have ability to relate to that person. It could be our friend, our family, etc., etc. So therefore, on our side of the house, we need to have some kind of like human trafficking scandal in order to talk about sex work. On our side of the house, this discourse is ongoing, right? So therefore, we have stories that we can discuss. We have ability to, for example, give advice to the OnlyFans models to actually not go into abusive relations with the customers, etc. We have more arguments pro and anti-sex work. So because of the discussion, and if it spreads, it creates engagement, it creates the knowledge about it throughout the entirety of the society, and therefore we have probably even ability to take care of it through legislation. So we have a greater ability to regulate sex work on our side of the house comparatively to what the government side is providing you. So therefore, it is way better on our side.
I think in further speech, and I remind speakers to take points of information. That being said, I invite the government whip to conclude the case for said government.
Hi, just to check if you can hear me, see me.
Yes to both.
Thank you. Give me just a second. So about 2 years ago, I was playing D&D with this historian dude, a bit older than me, and his job was working as an OnlyFans chatter. Of course, the people he was chatting with had no idea. They thought he was the model, whatever. He had quit that job after a conversation with a guy that was there chatting like every 3 to 4 days, when the guy told him that he spent half of his salary on OnlyFans. You know what's so sad about it? It's not that only that he lost half of his salary and he didn't have a big income. It's actually that he was so lonely, so suffering, so isolated that he was willing to spend most of what he had on a fake connection that he was destined to lose, that will only lead to further isolation, further suffering, and so on. I wish I made this story up. Sadly, it is true. Let's talk about this debate. So first, let's acknowledge the CEO has 0 responses to our case. I don't fault them for that. I also think it's a good case. I like it. Okay, so I hope at least they'll give us a POI if they plan to respond in the second one. Now I want to address their case. So their case is basically this leads to discourse, and this will lead to positive changes. I want to flip that, and then we can add it to our side. Why this discourse is bad and why it leads to stigmatization. So basically, like a few reasons. First, notice that most of the media is very stigmatizing, very biased when reporting on OnlyFans. They promote it, they talk about it in a very negative light, in a very judgmental light, and so on. Second, notice that most people have a negative view. They view this stuff as immoral and so on. So when they keep hearing about it, they feel really bad. They hear only the most extreme stuff, like sleeping with 1,000 men, which most people judge, and then they spill that over to most sex workers. I think that's really bad. Thirdly, it's actually seen by most as unfair because they only see the stories of like someone earning like millions of dollars, and then they take, look, I'm working like an everyday job, and these people are doing an immoral job and earning millions. What does this mean? This means that their discourse is awful, which they need to engage with. It leads to more stigmatization of all sex work. It leads overall to misogynistic like discourse. It's always stigmatizing women. It's really bad, and so on. Okay, so now let's move on to like the main part of this case. So on opening half, there is this big clash whether this is like a better alternative for prostitution, whether it's like bad, getting more people into sex work and so on. I say probably like both teams are right. Sometimes it is like better alternative and it can be good for the workers. Sometimes it's not. I think they both make valid points. It really does depend sort of on what it is. O makes a point that it's legitimate. I don't think they don't make it into a principal point. I don't think it even matters, but they say it's legitimate because it doesn't cause harm. We prove to that it does quite cause harm to people. Katarina's quite clear about that. I don't think then they have that entire thing, body positivity. I have no idea how they prove body positivity with this. Sorry, guys, I just didn't get that. Okay, so now I want to actually do some weighing, but before that, opening, do you have a question?
Later on, man.
Okay, fine. I'll give it to later. Okay, so now let's do some weighing, and this is so important. So one thing I want to clarify. I know in these debates we're mostly not used to talking about men, but look, guys, men are just as important. They have emotions just as strong. They're just as valid, and so on. So this should not be discounted. It is just as important here. So why do we go over the opening themes by talking to you about the harms done to men, both young and so on? Okay, so basically there are 4 reasons why this is the most important case in this debate. The first one has to do with scale. Notice that here you have a much larger amount of people because the viewers outnumber the models by far. I think that's intuitive, but if you want, I can like prove it. One reason is that's the only way this is profitable. In order for this system to make sense, you have to have for every model, you have to have 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 people following her. Second, notice especially the very large models and so on, that they have hundreds, thousands of people following them who most of them think they're chatting with the model themselves. It's really awful, and so on. And notice thirdly, like in most cases, when we have viewers and content, viewers outnumber the content makers by far, whether it's streaming, whether it's whatever. Meaning, what does that mean? It means that even if you count the harms as the same, but I think we impact it more, but even if you take their harms as like twice as important, notice that here you have 30, 40, 50 more people suffering these harms. So you have to value like one harm to one of their models as much as 40 harms to these people. And I think that's simply like very awful. Take into account the massive difference in scale that we are talking about. That's why this is the most important argument in this debate. Before I continue to the other 3 reasons why, go opening.
Yeah, since it's vastly symmetric, many scammers use feelings of loneliness to use you. Would you rather the lonely guy gives $20 to a chatbot or he opts into adult paid?
No. You don't listen to the case. You know that's not true. Come on, my friend. Like, look, what's the alternative to this? What was the case before? People used to go to Pornhub, which is free. At worst, you used to go to browsers, which again does have a personal connection. You pay 20 euros a month. Like, if someone scams you for like Nigerian prints, it's very different. And I know you guys, no, it's different. Katarina explains to you why this connection is unique, why you feeling not lonely is unique, and so on. Okay, let's move on to the others. So the scale is the first thing. I think just that is enough. Let's see the second thing. It's the certainty of harms. Like on opening, like I think you can see that for some people this is beneficial to do, for some it's not beneficial to do. But we prove to you that for pretty much everyone that is engaging in this, giving a lot of money, feeling lonely, feeling like they finally have a connection and then losing it when the models like upgrades and doesn't pay attention to them, or when they realize it's a scam and so on. For them, it's like quite a certain harm. Even for those that are the best of, they are losing a lot of money on this stupid stuff and so on. So there is a certainty of harm on this side. Thirdly, it's like the length of time that it goes. If a model has an awful time here, it's a really regrettable, and we acknowledge that, but often she can leave and so on, especially if she was not a major creator. Most people would not know you can block your own country there so that people cannot see you. Leave, get another job. But you're hooked into this. It's an addiction. Oftentimes there are people that most of them spend years there thinking they have a genuine connection for the first time and so on. That's an awful thing that suffers for a long time. And fourth, it's like the irreversibility of this, because notice that when you spend years being caught on a fake connection, you don't develop organic connections. You're stigmatized by society. You cannot get a girlfriend and so on. This is awful. After that, you suffer because you're in a situation where you're older and you don't have the skills that are necessary. Then you cannot form genuine connection. This is awful. Since men and women are both valid, we take this debate.
Thank you. And lastly, opposition whip to conclude this debate as a whole.
Okay, so firstly, am I audible?
You are.
Great. Then I'll prefer my POIs in a chat. And I also want to thank Dominic because for some reason he wants to spend his Sunday cheering for us. Okay, moving on. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ending what Patryk started, why the discourse is important and clashing directly with closing government, as they are the ones who bring upon us the characteristics of, this so-called sexualized content and discussing OnlyFans in podcast, on Instagram, on Twitter, like whatever, in those media. That's exactly the platform that we talked about. This is exactly where people can discuss their opinions, and I will show you, answering their push, that this sex work isn't going to be solely stigmatized. So, why the discourse is important in the first place is because for many years, especially before platforms such as OnlyFans have risen, this was a taboo topic. We didn't talk about sex workers, and we didn't talk about them in a way which allows us to understand their needs, why they chose sex work, or what it gives them, what kind of satisfaction, what kinds of money, this, and what emotions do they feel. This is very important to the extent that it also entangles with what the customers need and what all those lonely men on CG seek, and how it can be addressed. So why people are able to interact with that content and how this content about and around OnlyFans actually works. If I hear a podcast about OnlyFans simply because it is something that sells, because this is a hot topic, because as I mentioned before, it was taboo, now it's something new. Now we have these controversial challenges, etc., which are fringe cases, but yes, they generate interest and people click on those topics, and later algorithms in social media probably give them even more of that content. They are going to be able to form their own opinion, and probably there are people who believe that this girl who did this challenge pushed herself too far. Sometimes someone believes she's acting, and that's very important because now we see both sides of the same coin. And why people understand it that way and why people won't simply stigmatize, because now this content tangles with their emotional side, because it shows how someone feels and why the decisions are made, not showing women as the worst ones who are going to hunt on hungry men who need women's touch. I will take a POI from OG first before moving on.
Yes, creators are obviously more important than consumers because the consumers in many cases are the abusers of the creators. And
okay, I will engage with that in a moment. I understand your point. So moving on to what this discourse actually causes and may still cause in the future on benefits for future and present sex workers. Firstly, those people wanting to engage in sex work are more likely to understand what they get themselves into, because first, like before, especially when it was a taboo topic, you haven't had anyone to talk about it. You didn't see how it actually worked, apart from some shorts on Pornhub, etc., or going to some casting agency which you've never seen before. And secondly, which is very important, you know where to get help. You have many influencers who just left OnlyFans behind and talked about what was harmful there, why they personally weren't able to, put the boundaries, so they stepped down, etc. And thirdly, we believe that this kind of content gives general advice about sex, about boundaries, about this control that OO tries to prove to us and make it's exclusively to sex workers and to those online platforms. But as we talk about this topic as a whole, simply because OnlyFans and the boundaries crossed and the challenges have become a very important and hot topic, now people, especially young people within the social media, can see how boundaries are being pushed and compare it to themselves and understand what they are willing to do and what they're not. So finishing it off with engaging with closing government and every other theme. What TG tries to prove to us is that people lose money because of parasocial relationships on OnlyFans, but we do believe that there are many other platforms not only related to sex that provide parasocial relationships. You can even be in a parasocial relationship with your favorite influencer or celebrity, not exclusive to OnlyFans. And secondly, the problem is that we have epidemic of loneliness and not the fact that those platforms exist. So we do believe that losing your salary, it's sad, but you can also spend it on alcohol, gambling, or anything which will cause you to feel something when you feel empty and alone. So we do believe that there are more accessible ways and more probable ones than just chatting with an OnlyFans influencer. And secondly, we believe that if there is no connection available for such a lonely person, it is better to have a parasocial one than none, because at least it gives happiness to those people to some extent. So we don't get why this is so harmful in the end of the day, especially when not every single person will put all their money into it and be broke and lose everything. So weighing our content against theirs, we believe that our impact is just wider in scale, and as it entangles with potential sex workers and those who are sex workers in present, without the assumptions that sex work is inherently good or bad, as the openings also do. And secondly, because we show that because of this, because we even had a chance to discuss those parasocial relationships and this phenomenon, we can actually prevent people from falling into the trap that CG tries to warn you before. Comparing to opening government, we do believe that their impact isn't standing on their own, because from pushes from opening opposition, and also they try to prove that sex work is inherently bad and harmful in all ways, but we do not believe, as it's true, Patryk already showed you that. So their comparative relies on false assumptions that being escort or working in brothels, that all of those are legalized, civilized, and regulated, and are always a better alternative. And there were already pushes on that. And we do believe that as we entangle not only sex workers, but also a general public and young people, our impact is far more important and far more tangible than theirs. And when it comes to our opening, we believe that they mostly state about freedom of choice and opting out, but we don't believe that it's exclusive to every single scenario, and only we can show you why the general public can benefit on the biggest scale from existing of those platforms solely, and not because of what happens inside them. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech and all speakers for the debate. Speakers should now leave while the panel deliberates.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for the debate. It was great.
Thank you, it was fun.
Okay, let me just check. There are 6 people in the Zoom. There should not be 6 people in the Zoom.
Also, I think you forgot to stop the recording.
Oh, yeah, definitely better to not record our delib.